welcome to the Cinematic Reviewer. Today I'm reviewing Twisters. So I absolutely love disaster movies. My number one favorite movie is San Andreas. I love disaster movies. I like movies with, epic weather and intense action scenes. It's super, super cool to see. And, maybe it's not the most complex story with characters and everything, but it can still be really good. And I did watch Twister for the first time a couple weeks ago in anticipation for this movie, and I'll be honest, it wasn't that awesome, great movie for me, but it was still definitely enjoyable. Obviously, it had some very silly moments, and so much of the time, obviously, you kind of have to suspend your disbelief with how much they survive, but that's kind of par for the course, the plot armor for main characters. But all in all, it's still a good movie, great chemistry between all the characters. It's got some good heart and character to it. Now, going into this movie, it looked like it could be a good movie. I didn't know exactly what we were in for, but it's okay, you would think this is a reboot. But then they kept promoting it and saying it's a sequel. So it's okay, is it gonna connect to the original? Not at all. But it's still hey, I still think this could be a good movie, and I have seen Glen Powell, the main guy, before, so I definitely, recognize him, and so far have enjoyed him in his other roles. So I'm hey, let's get into it. Let's have some fun. And I'm not saying this is bad or anything, but it's mediocre. It's just another sequel, to be hey, this IP exists and we're gonna make another thing of it. It's okay, good for you guys, Also, I have to say, the fact that there was so much promo for this movie about Glen Powell and his adopted dog, and then in the movie, they mention a dog that his character is looking for, and so the main girl, she asked him, hey, did you find the dog? And he's yeah, I did. And that's it. Why would you tell me there's a dog if we don't even get to see the dog? At least in the first movie, we get to see that golden retriever a couple times. What's up with that? But that's obviously a little baby nitpick. But still, one thing about this movie, especially the fact that this is not an original movie, It's supposed to connect to something that already exists. In the first movie, maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't remember them having accents, and if they did, it wasn't that strong. Also, the music they had in the first one was pretty decent, but in this movie, it's all country. Now, one thing you should know about me, the one kind of genre of music that I can't stand is country. So I'm oh, let it be over. This is getting... Stop it already. But obviously, if you are a fan of country, you're just oh, this is banger after banger. This is great. So obviously, different tastes, that sort of thing. And I would say, again, I can't remember with certainty, but I could have sworn there wasn't accents for the characters in the first movie. Maybe I'm mistaken. But in this one, it was a little weird. Sometimes they had the accents, sometimes it went away, then it'd come back, and it's I just don't like that vibe of it. And I get it, kind of why they said it. She starts the movie off in New York because she was all traumatized by what happened to her in college. And so one of the kids is oh, would we see a tornado here? And she's oh, not really. So obviously, yes, it makes sense in the place where you're supposed to be in Oklahoma, the accents, the music, but I'm oh, this just does not work for me. And where was the suspense music? Some good suspenseful music? Nothing. That was a really good part and element in the first movie. They're gonna do what they're gonna do, but it was a little come on, guys. There are elements. You did a fairly good formula with the first movie. Just pick out a couple of those golden things you did and put them in this one. And they're nah, whatever. I'm a little you guys do what you're gonna do, but whatever. Now, character-wise, like character actor-wise. Like I said, Glen Powell, he did a really good job. He was like the only dynamic actor character in the movie. Like, it's well deserved that he's starring in more movies these days. So it's like, hey, great for him. You know, winner, hooray, good for you. Everyone else, not really. Like, I was really hoping that the main girl would have some, you know, chops to her, and she really didn't. Like, she's there. She does what she came to do, but it's not that good dynamic sort of way of portrayal that you're hoping for from an actor, which is too bad, because like, I do not like to be that kind of person that's critical about someone's performance. If it's really bad, yeah, I'll talk about it, but if it's kind of like neutral, kind of mediocre, kind of like I'm saying about this movie, it's a little like, you know? And I feel, I do not actually know the age gap currently, I might just put it up here, but the fact that Glen Powell, it just seems like he's got some good experience and he's learned a lot. And this girl, maybe she has started new things. I could have sworn I have heard of this Daisy Edgar-Jones before. I could be mistaken, but it is kind of like, it seems like she's new to this and she's learning. So I wouldn't give her a hard time. It's kind of like, yeah, you're figuring this out. So, you know, however many movies she's done, whether this be one of her first or, you know, she's been doing this a while, I'm sure she could grow into being a better actress, but this one just was not really much of anything. Now, a really good element of this movie was the stakes. Like, I would say for Twister, for the first movie, it was a little like, yeah, there's stakes, but it's just, they're gonna survive. Everything's gonna be fine. But in this movie, multiple times, I was like, actually physically tense. I'm like, ooh, like, maybe they'll actually do something kind of different. Like, maybe they'll kill one of our main characters off. They didn't, but it really had a good way. They just did so good with, like, the actual storm of it. Like, multiple times when I was watching Twister, I'm like, I don't think they should be that close to the storm. It should pick them up. Like, this is kind of ridiculous. But in this one, yes, there's still a lot of suspension and disbelief, and it doesn't make sense that they're not dead. But still, all things considered, you know, with these monster beast tornado storms, they did so good with, like, how, you know, all the carnage and wreckage that a tornado causes, and also just how rough it is for anyone who's, like, in its proximity. Like, they did a good job there. Now, I did find it interesting, the fact that she was going to work with her friend, and it was going to be more like this corporate team, and then you got the other side with Glen Powell, where, you know, it's just like these more independent YouTuber type people, and when you first see them, it does seem like they're the silly ones, and this corporate team is more serious and, like, actually knows what they're doing. And of course, things change because when is corporate ever a good guy, right? But I think they should have toned it down a little bit with how silly the main group, the primary group we should focus on in the movie, like the good guys. It was a little hard to take any of them seriously, and especially Glen Powell. The fact that he actually did study meteorology and he knows what he's talking about, but he just does a lot of, like, really dumb things, especially in that early start of the movie. It's just like, he's acting like one of those silly guys, just like, woo, let's have fun, and do some really dumb things with such a beast of a monster of weather. It's like, I don't know, I feel like there's ways to have fun, but still keep it where I can take it seriously, and I don't think they did that great of it. Like, it took them a long time to switch over to, yes, he does take this seriously, he does know what he's talking about, he is knowledgeable. I also feel the duration of time it took for him to even really be a main character in the movie was a little ridiculous. Like, we are following the main girl and her friend and that corporate team a little bit too long, and then their team were like, yeah, they're kind of opposing us, kind of like how the opposing guy who used to be a part of their team in the first movie. So, like, yeah, you see that sort of similarity, but then we find out, oh, these people are not good guys, and actually the people we thought were just, scammer types selling all these shirts, they're actually charitable and good and nice. It just took too long at times for him to actually just start a partnership with the main girl and for them to work together and everything. It's a little like, yeah, I would have been more down to see them work together earlier in the movie. I don't think we needed as much time with her working with her friend. The one thing, obviously, that is advantageous to that, if you want to go based on the script and how they executed it in the movie and everything, the fact that he doubts her, then he learns that she does have these good instincts, especially with the twisted sisters, if you will. With the twin tornadoes, that he takes the right, she takes the left, and it turns out the left spiral is the one that sticks around. Like, yeah, it's good for him to learn and everything, and for them to slightly get to know each other. I just feel like it took a little bit longer than it needed to. Also, one of the more good elements of the first movie was the humor and the character. Like, just like this more, they feel like real people in the first movie. And there is good humor in the first movie. And I did not feel that in this movie. Especially the main girl. She's kind of depressed, kind of whatever. And then even the parts that are supposed to be like humorous, lighthearted, funny, just didn't get that vibe. It was a little not executed all that well. One thing that I do appreciate from this movie is at the start there, where she and her friends, they're doing this college experiment and everything, and everyone dies. Like, that's horrible and such a traumatic thing to deal with. And so then it takes place 5 years later. The fact that she's not chasing storms anymore, that she's over in New York instead of Oklahoma, where she used to live and everything, it makes perfect sense. Like, after that horrible thing that happened, and you feel so guilty about, the fact that you were really trying to chase it and this was your experiment and it didn't work and then you lost everyone. Yeah, like, you're gonna feel terrible and traumatized, like, absolutely awful. And that's the one thing that was a little bit in the first movie with Helen Hunt, where it's like, yeah, she loses her dad as a child, but she's chasing storms. I mean, like, there's a reason she does it, but it is one of those things of like, yeah, I think that would be something that's kind of hard to deal with. Kind of like how people, if someone, dealt with a shark attack, you wouldn't exactly want to go and be, one of those people that goes and is in the water all the time. Now, honestly speaking, there are elements in the movie that exist, if you will. I just don't think this movie was all that well executed, and the entertainment value, it didn't hook me in. I wasn't sold on it. Like, I'm trying to think of some things to talk about for this review. That's more what was on my mind rather than the movie itself. Like, I'm trying to be pulled in, I'm trying to be sucked into it, like a tornado, right? But otherwise, it was a little like, I'm telling you, it's just a mediocre movie. It exists. You could watch it if you want to. Like, that's your prerogative. But, if you want to watch a good disaster movie, there are so many movies out there. And other tornado movies. Like, I did actually rewatch Into the Storm recently. And maybe it's not the best. Maybe it's not great. But I still enjoyed it. I still had fun with it. And watching Twister, like, that's good. Like, those are some fun movies. But Twisters was kind of like, whatever. In the first movie, in Twister, with the girl who's the fiancé, and so she doesn't know about this stuff about storm chasing, anything about tornadoes, and so she's asking certain questions. I still feel, at least in my impression with how it was dealt with, especially with Philip Seymour Hoffman maybe, it felt sometimes when they would explain things, they were a little condescending to her, but not so much so that it's like, oh, they're treating her badly. It's not really like that. It's just one of those, you're the character that's going to go away, so we're not going to, be all that heartfelt with you. So it's like, whatever. But she asks certain questions, and obviously the answers are more for us, the audience. We don't know about tornadoes. Like, obviously someone who does study tornadoes would be like, oh, I already know this stuff. But like in Twister, there's good explanations, and it's super simple, to the point. It's something we can easily understand. Now, what this movie, what Twisters fails to do, is give us that simplistic, easy to understand, more general audience sort of information. The number of times their science-y talk was ridiculous. I'm like, okay, if you guys want to do like maybe a documentary movie, if you want to talk about tornadoes, fine, that's cool. But if we're here for a movie which is primarily about entertainment and hopefully fun, is like, we don't need the sciencey crap. And even with all the stuff they talked about, they didn't give like a simplified explanation, you know? It's a little like, okay, who is this for? Like I'm saying, someone who already knows this stuff, they'd be like, ah, I know this stuff. But everyone else, it's like, okay, like, thanks. You know, this is going right over our heads. We're not exactly taking in this information. And I'd say, especially as it gets somewhere around halfway through the movie, they start really hammering into this sciencey talk and just overcomplicating things. And it's just like, nothing. Not really much of anything. Like, I do think they did a good job with the trauma, with what happened with that tornado affects her and everything, losing these friends, her boyfriend and everything, the fact that it was her fault, and, you know, when Glen Powell comes to see her in her home, in her barn and everything, and finds that notebook where it details her theory and her experiment and everything, and she's just kind of freaking out about the whole thing. Like, that was very well done. And the fact that, yeah, she just wants to avoid that stuff. She doesn't want to think about that stuff anymore. She kind of wants to block it out, push it away. Now, obviously, it works out really good at the end where, you know, they do this new element of incorporating the stuff for the humidity and everything, so they're able to absorb it and the tornado goes away, which is great. But it's a movie, okay? It exists. It's just, it doesn't bring anything new to the table. Pretty much every single element that is in this movie we've seen before. So it's just kind of like, we know why this movie exists. It exists to have something that's already an existing IP, something new to it, you know, just creating another thing, gonna rack some cash in instead of an original story. That's how they're gonna roll, you know? That's just how it goes right now, especially right now. But definitely the part earlier in the movie when she and her friend are still working with the corporate people and everything, and she's like, you know, he's telling her, okay, so we're trying to get a three-dimensional view of the tornado. So, you know, one of the trucks is going to be stationed here, one here, and we're going to be at the front. So you got to tell me where the front of the tornado should be. And so they are in the place that they should be, but she totally panics and freaks out. And, you know, you see that started trauma of the wipers stop working and certain things are already happening. And so, of course, she bails. She gets them out of there. And it's like, that's a really good element. That was really well done. So there are some decent storytelling in this movie, but a lot of it, it's just kind of whatever. Like, I do wish there was a stronger story here. I very much wanted to enjoy this movie. It's just kind of like, okay, watched it. Also, that one scene when Glen Powell's going to see her, I know it doesn't matter, but I just thought it was kind of funny, where it's like it's not supposed to be, but it was just so silly. Like, I guess I'll show you so that you can see what I'm talking about, but it's like, he's walking to her, so we only see his bag. But, like, he's walking in such a way of, like, swaying the hips and just, like, that kind of way of walking. It was just so silly. So let me just demonstrate. you guys could see that, but it was just so silly. I'm telling you, the good way of making like something humorous and funny, a good way of doing that, this movie doesn't do that. But some things are just kind of silly and ridiculous, and oh my gosh, the amount of suspension of disbelief. It's not as severe as Twister is, especially with like the fact that they're like, oh, let's hold on to this thing and we're gonna be okay, and they end up in, you know, the whole tornado and they're just fine, no scrapes, no nothing. But then we saw, you know, the tornado pick up a truck and all that sort of stuff. Like, I know it's gonna be ridiculous and not make any sense. But when we get to that finale moment in this Twisters movie where it's like, okay, we need to stop this because in this theater we don't have a bunker and this isn't equipped for that. And it's a beast. It's humongous, this tornado is. And so stuff is already getting taken apart. All these buildings and, you know, people are getting sucked in and everything. But then the girl, she's like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And so she takes the truck and she goes in, you know, headed for the storm and everything. What is up with the material in that truck? That thing is indestructible. What in the world? But the fact that it's like, oh, she's just fine. People are dying so much farther away from the tornado. She gets there, she hooks those things in, you know, so that the truck stays in one place. And of course, you know, trying to hit the button and it doesn't work, you know, to raise the stakes or whatever. Finally it works, and then, you know, the storm is getting too bad, and so then, you know, it topples the truck over and everything. Somehow it doesn't pick up the truck because those stakes aren't in the ground anymore, but still all this stuff is getting sucked into the tornado from so much farther away. Bro, like really? But then somehow, you know, obviously the good thing of she figured it out, they did the proper formula, so the tornado goes away. And even though it makes way more sense that she'd have way more damage on herself from this crazy tornado, like a little bit of blood here, and that's like it. It's like, oh, she's just fine, of course. That plot armor of movies is so strong, but it's just a little ridiculous. Either way, it was still decent, and the end part of the movie, you know, the little resolution part of the movie where she's at the airport and everything, and so Glen Powell, you know, talks to her, whatever, and so she leaves and everything, and he sticks around, and that guy who's like, okay, you gotta move, man. And so also that truck is still indestructible because somehow, even though with all the damage it had, it's still kicking, right? But you know, he digs the stakes in so they can't tow his car because he's been staying there for too long, and then he goes and meets with the girl. And it's like, at least in Twister, with the romantic element, they actually kiss, and this one, they don't do it. And so, you know, he goes and sees her and everything, and then on the intercom it's like, oh, inclement weather, we won't be able to go anywhere. And that's how the movie ends. It's fine, you get it, that like she's gonna stick around. But it's like, it would have been fine if they kissed. It wouldn't be the end of the world, guys. So, all in all, it's not the worst movie I've seen this year, but it's not necessary, you know? It's just another one of those movies where, you know, one of those corporate people decided, hey, what if we did another Twister movie? And someone's like, yeah, here's all this money, go do it. And I was like, yeah, okay. Go ahead. I guess it's just another movie, another sequel where it's kind of like, whatever. But I have full confidence that the next movie I'm going to see next week, Deadpool and Wolverine, is going to be great. Like, that movie has so much potential, and I'm sure it's going to be super fun, super great, and awesome. So I am certain that this next movie review from me is going to be positive. It's gotta be, please! Like, I don't go into a movie wanting to be displeased. Like, It's just some of these movies are just subpar, not hitting, that sort of thing. Well, that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, comment below, and if you liked this video and would like to see more movie content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time!